welcome to Platform Leaders. We've got a fantastic program for you. We're going to talk about the impact of AI on marketplaces. We're going to talk about agentic commerce and the regulation of agentic AI. I'm Laure Reillier, Platform Leaders co-chair and CEO of Collective Intelligence for AI. Collective Intelligence for AI is a community we're building alongside platform leaders to help people and organizations prepare for transformative AI. More on that from my co-chair, Benoit, at the end. So for those joining us for the first time, Platform Leaders brings together the communities building the future of digital platforms. And that includes entrepreneurs, investors, practitioners, policymakers, and academics. So today you can interact and submit your questions, comments, reactions through the chat. You can choose to share your comments with everyone or just the panelists. My colleague Justin will do his best to surface questions at the relevant time. The event today is being illustrated in real time by Liam and will share what he captures during the event. But now let's move to what's in store for today. So we have 3 sessions. First, we'll start with a fireside chat with Fabrice Grinda on the future of marketplaces and AI. Second, we'll move to the topic of agentic commerce with marketplaces and platform experts Anne-Claire Baschet, Singh, and Professor Yash Kanoria. And then we'll move to our regulation panel, where Professor Alexandre de Streel, Giulio Coraggio, Catherine Chappell, and Hazemi-Jebelli will talk about how to regulate agentic AI. And finally, Benoit Reillier, my co-chair, will wrap up the event and announce the 3 finalists of the Platform Leaders Academic Prize for 2026. But now to our fireside chat. We're incredibly excited to have Fabrice Grinda with us today. Fabrice started as a serial entrepreneur. He co-founded OLX, a classified platform with 300 million users in 30 countries. Fabrice is now the founding partner of FG Labs, an early-stage venture capital firm focused on online marketplaces and network effects startups. Fabrice is one of the world's most prolific marketplace investors. He has invested in over 1,000 of them and seen more than 300 exits. So I would say that his pattern recognition on platform disruption is hard to match. Fabrice, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So I'm going to start with the launch of ChatGPT. So ChatGPT launched at the end of 2022. And so that was a big moment. And shortly afterwards, a few platforms like Chegg, a tutoring marketplace, started to lose 90% of their traffic to LLMs like ChatGPT. So a lot of marketplace founders panicked, worrying that effectively large language models could replace them. And I do remember at the time having conversations with marketplace clients. And of course, it's a lot more nuanced. But based on what you've seen of the last 3.5 years, are those fears justified or overblown?
Overblown. I'm actually seeing more opportunity, meaning things you can do with AI to inflect your business and make it much better than I'm seeing threats. There are a few, obviously, counterexamples where, like Chegg, your supply can be replaced with the LLM, but they're far and few between, right? Like ChatGPT is not going to be delivering your DoorDash food order. Yeah.
Excellent. So I do remember that when I worked at eBay, I learned a lot about consumer behavior, and a lot of buyers on eBay browsed as a hobby in the hope of finding a bargain without searching for anything specific. And we also had other buyers who were looking for specific items, and so they would go to the search bar with a specific query. And then I guess there's also another kind of buyer, which is more about people who want to make a considered purchase, say an electric car, and they're really looking for information or advice. So which of those segments is more vulnerable to disruption by AI, and which of those are more protected?
Yeah. So first of all, most of the traffic falls in the first two categories. So if you go to Vinted, people are just browsing. It's kind of shopping as entertainment. It's lo like looking at what's available with no real idea of purchase. The visit to purchase rate is reasonably low. And I can tell you that in the top 10,000 priorities in Anthropic or OpenAI, like creating a feed of entertaining shopping content that is bespoke for you is not in that list. And so the browsing as entertainment, which is the equivalent of like, going in Broadway and Soho, is fully protected. Like there's no efficiency to be gained. Number two, search reasonably protected as well, for two reasons. One is most people just go to Amazon or eBay or whatever destination they want. They're looking for something, given the market shares of these marketplaces. If you just want an OLED LG C3 65-inch TV, there's no reason to go to ChatGPT or Claude to start the process. You just go to Amazon, buy it, done, one click. And to the extent there's value capture at the top of funnel here, it's probably not more than the equivalent SCM value, right? Like so, it is you can actually buy ads on Google and be in Google Shopping or be in the search results there, but it's tiny percentage of the value, especially since most of the value is derived from the execution. Like inventory, shipping, payment, fulfillment, returns, et cetera, all the things that the LLMs are not going to do, don't want to do, or not going to do. And by the way, um, these marketplaces are winner takes most. So where you're getting this inventory from is actually one or two or three marketplaces max. So they have a lot of pricing power. So very little risk of disruption. Number
Hmm.
three, of course, considered purchases is much more risky. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, an LLM is actually in a very good position to help you, especially if it knows you very well, what you need, like the type of house you should buy, the neighborhood you should be in, the car, etc. Now, whether a vertical integrated LLM within Amazon like Rufus or an Instacart or Carvana versus an OpenAI is the right answer, unclear. But honestly, even though there's more risk of disruption here, the more the marketplace does from a work perspective, the more value they're going to capture. So maybe you discover that the car you want to buy, you figure out which one it is on OpenAI. But at the end of the day, if the only place where you're going to get the experience you want is Carvana, they're still going to capture a very large chunk of the value. So I'm not too worried, frankly, even there. What matters more is what's the frequency of purchase, what's the average order value, how managed is the marketplace, how much work is the marketplace doing, and how fragmented the supply is, right? Like, so I'm more worried for an Expedia where there's a few airlines that are essentially monopoly routes where I can imagine, just buy me whatever a ticket in New York to Miami, and there's not that many options, and the price and the LM could do it effectively. But things like DoorDash, where you have thousands and thousands of restaurants, you have thousands and thousands of delivery people. It's transactions every day, et cetera. There is zero world in which this gets disrupted by the LLMs.
Yeah, great. And certainly when I was at eBay, we used to talk about the treasure hunting buyer. So someone who would browse for hours, with no specific purchase in mind. And that's a behavior that AI can't really replicate or replace, because the value is in the browsing itself, not in the transaction, right? And that's the same with marketplaces like Vinted as well. So that's a really nice segue into, what in your view are the key aspects of marketplace defensibility against AI? You mentioned a few already.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you
the
have a
more
framework
managed,
for
yeah,
this? Yeah.
yeah. So the more managed the marketplace is, the more work it does. If you're dealing with inventory, shipping, payments, returns, the better, right? Like, and if you think of three-sided marketplaces like DoorDash, where you have the consumers, the restaurants, and the delivery people, even better. If the transaction volumes are low and frequent, Uber would fall in that category, also better. So Amazon, eBay, DoorDash, Uber, all these are protected from the LLM discoveries. The one I worry more about are the ones that are doing very little work and or letting people, do the work in themselves for finding the service provider, like the Thumbtack and Angie's List, the old school marketplaces or the Craigslist of the world where you do the work, like, oh, I want a handyman, and then 50 people apply. Like in an agentic world, the agent should be able to pick, the marketplace should be able to pick the person for you. And in fact, there are vertical marketplaces that are doing this that are disrupting these old school marketplaces. So I'm more worried about Expedia as well because consolidation of supply. But then again, it's not just if the supply is concentrated, it's not just bad because agents could go do it for you. It's actually bad in general. You have no pricing power, right? Like booking.com can take 15% commission on the hotels because there's thousands of long tail hotels. But in the airline world, you can't make 15% because of the supply won't pay it. So supply concentration and frankly demand concentration matters a lot, but it matters a lot in marketplaces regardless, not
Yeah,
just because of the LLMs. The LLMs make it worse, but it matters anyway.
yeah, exactly. Um, so in your view, AI can also offer lots of opportunities for founders, right? There are many examples like cross-border trade, where listings can be automatically translated, customer service automations, listing description enrichments, etc. Can you share some concrete examples of founders who are getting this right today?
Yeah, so in Europe, my favorite company example is Vinted. Before Vinted came along, in Europe, it was really not Europe. It was you had a French side and you had a German side and you had a Polish side and you had a British side. But now they auto translate the listings. They auto translate the conversations between the buyers and the sellers. So you may think that you're speaking to someone in France, but actually they're in Germany and you're in France, but you're both speaking in your native language. And so you're getting cross-border liquidity, which is allowing them to use the fact that they won in France and the UK to go and then win other geographies. And so now they've won essentially Italy and Spain and Portugal and Germany and Poland, et cetera, using their French liquidity. Obviously, you need embedded payments and shipping that's effective. But having that, the automatic translations matter a lot. Number two, in most marketplaces, especially the consumer facing ones, 99% of people are buyers. There are not that many sellers because it takes work to sell. And now with AI, you make selling a lot easier. So the visit to listing rate is going up, right? If you imagine eBay, I need to go and take 20 photos. I need to write a title. I need to write a description. I need to select a category. I need to pick a price. That's a lot of work. With AI right now, you can just take one photo and boom, Vinted will say, okay, this is the item, this is the category, title, description, suggested price, and you can just say go. It increase so if you do these things, immediately you can get like a 20, 30% uplift in the number of listings. You can immediately get a 20, 30% uplift in transactions because of cross-border. And now we're seeing like Wallapop, which is a leading classified site in France. Sorry, in France and Spain is actually using cross-border to get demand from Italy and Portugal and France, and they're never going to win in these markets, but it's just incremental demand. We're investors in a company called Ovoco, which is car parts, and same thing. They're sourcing in Eastern Europe, they're selling in France. Even in B2B, we're in a company in France, in Europe, in Germany called Car and Sales, a B2B car marketplace, and um, they're now getting 20 to 5% of their transactions cross border, selling the cars that they've sourced in Germany and the rest of Europe. So and that's not even including the fact that you can integrate customer care agents, so you have a higher NPS, lower cost. Many of my companies have now 50% lower customer care costs than they did a year ago with higher NPS because they've integrated a product called Ace Waves, which is like a Sierra for marketplaces. And then, of course, you're improving programmer productivity by having all your programmers using Cloud Code, et cetera.
That's great examples. Thank you, Fabrice. So you've advised marketplaces to embrace answer engine optimization and index themselves in LLMs to capture incremental traffic. We also do, and we even produced guides at Collective Intelligence for AI to encourage founders to embrace AEO and GSO, or generative search optimization. But you've also said that dominant marketplaces should resist or delay partnerships with LLMs to protect their data. Why is that? And how does a founder know which strategy applies to them?
Well, to if you're hyper dominant, if you have a 95% market share, then yes, you should not index yourself, and you should not go index yourself in Google either, right? So to me, the you don't want to change. If you're the dominant player, people come directly to you, then you don't want to change behavior, so you don't index yourself. But how many marketplaces in the world at that level of dominance and market share? Like, I don't know, five, three? Like, if you're going to index yourself in Google for SEM for SEO, then you should absolutely index yourself in the LLMs. And right now, they don't send you that much traffic, to be clear. I mean, right now, the LLMs are about a third of the traffic of the search engines, but in terms of traffic, they send you is like 2%, 3%. It's a much, much less because they give you an answer and then you go and execute it on your own. So it's free incremental traffic, but it's not a huge amount of traffic. But why not do it? But the way I would index myself is index yourself, but don't let them use you for training data, which is some of the settings you can set when you're being crawled by the LLMs. Um, but no, the answer for 99.99% of marketplaces out there is absolutely index yourself on Google, get the free SEO, get the free AEO, be in Gemini, be in Claude, be on OpenAI. No reason not to.
Okay. So you've invested in over 1,000 marketplace businesses and lived through multiple technology waves. So when you look at the history of technological revolutions, what pattern do you see playing out with AI? And what's the one thing founders consistently get wrong during those transitions?
Yeah, during transitions, people overestimate the impact that the revolution has in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. So in the late 90s, people thought it was immediately going to, during the bubble, everything is going to happen immediately. And in a way, they were right. And pets.com is Chewy, and and the Webvan is Instacart. And so a lot of the ideas at the time, Cosmo is like DoorDash, but they all died because it took a lot longer. And we here are at the forefront technology, right? We're implementing, I have like 7 agents running that I'm coding on a permanent basis. I'm building more now than I've ever built in my entire life. Um, and so we assume that these things are going to happen very quickly at a global level. And the reality is most of the economy is controlled by public services and governments, and large enterprise. When do I think that whatever the IRS is going to use AI to like be more efficient, maybe even pre-fill your form? When do I think that the DMV is going to use AI to make it much easier for you to get your driver's license replaced? Or large enterprise who are slow adopters, slow movers, who are currently they've hired consultants to have conversations about it. What should we do with AI? Like before this seeps into actual productivity data and real world changes. I mean, the thing is, because we here are all the forefront of AI implementation, we think it's happening extraordinarily fast. But if you look at the percentage of people in the world that are using Codex and Plot Code and Cursor and doing really cool stuff with it, it's like 0.1% of like GPT users. And by the way, most of humanity has not used an LLM yet, right? Like, so we're still at the very beginning of the AI revolution, even though in the startup world, because of course it improves productivity and lowers costs, we're the early adopters who were using it very quickly. So to me, it's another productivity revolution. It's going to make things cheaper, better, faster, which is what the internet has always been about. But as usual, it'll take a lot longer than we think it does. I mean, let me give you a similar example. In 2012 or whatever, 2010, when I invested in Uber, I was worried that self-driving cars were going to remove the moat they have on drivers. And therefore, they were going to erode their dominant position. And I was worried that maybe because of self-driving cars coming around the corner, I should maybe not invest in the high valuations in Uber. We're now like, whatever, 16 years later, and there's only 3,000 self-driving cars on the road. Culture moves slowly. Policy moves slowly. Tech moves fast, but policy and culture move slowly. And so people are overestimating the impact it's going to have in the short term. And again, as usual, underestimating the impact it's going to have in the long term.
Yes, so absolutely. And we forget sometimes that we live in a bubble. So each technology wave from the steam engine, electricity, the internet, digital platforms has brought big productivity gains in the long run. So, I think, we probably expect that with AI. What do you say to those who predict a job apocalypse and a collapse of society?
Oh yeah, completely wrong. It's always the Malthusian concerns and the Luddite concerns are completely wrong. I mean, will the job change it? Will there be job losses? Yes, but there's always been more job created than job loss. And this time is different. Has never been true, and I'll explain why I don't think it's going to be true this time either. But imagine we go back 200 years. We're in 1826. We have a life expectancy of 29. We're all working, living on less than $1 a day. We're all in extreme poverty. We're all farmers, and we're working 80 hours a week, going hungry multiple times a year. Now let's go, and then we start having things like the loom, and we start automizing and automating agricultural production. And a lot of farmers were against it, like, oh my God, we're going to do? We're going to no longer be able to have jobs. And lo and behold, today we have 2% of the population in agriculture producing more food than ever before. And they all found jobs. And actually, because productivity increased, wages increase. The number one driver of wages is actually productivity, and it also drives how many hours a week we work. So if I go back to 1926, then we're life expectancy of 53. We're working about 55 hours a week. We're now working 6 days a week, and half farmers, half factory workers. And again, automation, we became white collar workers. Now let me go back to 2000. Let's say I took a time machine from today to 2000, and we were having this conversation. And I told you guys in 2000, you know what? I just came back from 2026. The top four job categories of 2000 have no longer exist. There are no more red bank tellers. There are no more travel agents. All of car manufacturing has now been automated and done by robots. And 1 trillion of small local retail has been decimated and gone online, and it's on e-commerce. Please now describe to me the economic conditions of 2026. And people would be like, oh my God, Great Depression, high unemployment, et cetera. We have higher employment, lower unemployment, 2x the GDP per capita now that we had then, and we work few hours. And same thing, like in 2012, 13, when people were worried about the self-driving cars, they're like, oh, top job category in the US, 4.8 million is truck drivers. They're going to go to zero. What are they going to do? What are they be retrained as, et cetera? And we're now 14 years later. First of all, none of these jobs have disappeared yet. Now, undoubtedly they will, but these things take a lot longer than people think. And also, people don't realize what the elasticity of demand is at lower prices. People a year ago were like, oh my God, job apocalypse, there will be no more need for programmers. AI will code everything itself. Well, it turns out when the cost of coding goes down, the demand for coding goes up more, such that there are more open jobs for programmers today than there were a year ago. And so now the elasticity of supply and demand is such that not every category will be like that. If things get cheaper, um, more jobs will be created. Sometimes there will be, sometimes there won't. But I have zero worry about the fact that you create amazing jobs will be created. And by the way, the jobs we're eliminating are jobs that humans should not be doing, right? We should not be like doing like moving packages or driving cars or carrying boxes and doing repetitive manual tasks that are better done by robots and AI.
Okay, yes, and the same is happening to radiologists as well. They're getting more and more work because it's cheaper to get a radio that is reviewed by AI, but the radiologist still needs to be there to effectively sign and make sure that the diagnostic is correct. So, what does that expanded future look like to you? In the world of AI, not just for marketplaces, but for society more broadly.
Yeah, so as in most of these disruptions, there's periods of dislocation, and I'm sure there would give me moment. I mean, right now we're at peak AI fear. By the way, every technology revolution is light of fear. When the bicycle was invented, people thought that it was going to lead to the fraying of moral values because women were going to be able to go and have affairs because they were not going to be stuck in their home anymore. And so the press had like horror stories of like bicycles like destroying the fabric of society and people like dying in accidents, etc. When the radio was invented, the same thing happened. When the TV was invented, the same thing happened. When rock and roll, when the internet was invented, with thing and with social media. Now the same thing on AI. We're at peak AI. Now I'm actually beyond bullish, even though there's going to be a period of disruption, and we're also in a reasonably high peak geopolitical uncertainty and a populism ebbs and flows, and it's been flowing of late. But there are a number of interesting trends that are happening. So first of all, solar continues to become cheaper every year. to the point that this is the first year of the solar in the production of the, I mean, a decade ago, solar as a percentage of energy production was like 0.1% in the US. The most optimistic forecasts were like, oh, it'll be in a decade like 1%. We're now at 12.7%. It's overtaking coal. And it keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so we're getting to the point where, frankly, most of the new capacity being added globally is going to be solar. And at some point, we're going to have the marginal cost of electricity go essentially to zero. And batteries are also becoming cheaper. So solar divides by 10 in cost per decade. So it's divided by 100 in the last 20 years. Same thing is happening with the batteries. And now batteries plus solar is getting so cheap that it is being added kind of everywhere. And I can see a world where by 2040, we've basically already moved most of our energy production to carbon neutral. Because all the cars are also being produced or becoming electric. I mean, the US is a laggard on this, but the electricity stack is happening everywhere else, where like 50% of the new cars sold in China were electric, 99% in like Norway, 75% in Denmark. Within a decade, like 100% of the cars sold will be electric, and so within 20 years, 100% of the cars of the world will be electric. So we're going to actually deal with the. I mean, we've already emitted so many greenhouse gases. We have some warming in store, but we will no longer be emitting net new carbon emissions from electricity production and transportation within whatever 20, 30 years. And wonderful things happen when you start getting a world of abundance of electricity. Once it's free, kind of the same way that computing, now that it's massively free, we're using it for things like video games, like whatever. All these constraints people think we have go away. Like, or like, oh, we no longer have fresh water. Well, that's not true. 70% of the earth is water. If you have infinite free electricity, you can desalinate, and then you have infinite fresh water. If you have infinite fresh water, then you can grow crops in the desert and you can have vertical farms. So vertical cost of food goes to zero. So we are heading towards a world of abundance. Now it's going to take whatever 100 years, but let's say I go to 2100. Can I imagine a world where we're all working 20 hours a week to have a quality of life that's unimaginable to not only the kings of yesteryear, but the people in the present today, and where everyone and the main challenge is going to be, okay, if we're no longer struggling to survive, what is our purpose? And so the defining, I think, role of the 21st century and challenge is going to be, okay, and I suspect a big chunk of the mental health crisis we're facing today is actually a crisis of prosperity. In a world where you're no longer struggling to survive and you can self-actualize, you need to figure out what are your purposes if you're no longer in a way needed to put food on the table for your kids and get a roof over your head, and all those things are going to be provided. So we're headed for a world of prosperity. And the challenge is going to be figuring out, what we do with said prosperity and how do we find purpose in world prosperity. But I think it's going to be a fun, interesting challenge and better than like having to struggle to survive.
Well, thank you, Fabrice. Let's now open the floor for questions, and I've been looking through the chat. There's one question which is directly related to what you've just said, so I'm going to start with this one. It's a question from Bérangère. She's asking, what are you excited about for humanity with all this time back? In which area of the human experience would you invest on the very long term?
Yeah. So if you think of like if you look at Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is like an optimistic piece of media in the 1990s, uh, where there's no currency in that world, and I suspect we will still have currency because there'll still be some constraints. People do things for the fun of it, right? Like you want to grow wine, or you want to become a starship captain, or an engineer, or a painter, or whatever. But I'm very excited for the fact that people will do roles that make more sense for humans to do, right? Like if I take Socrates from 2,500 years ago and I bring him to the world of today, there's very little of this world that he's going to recognize. We can fly from one side of the world to the other. We can go to space. We have like these magical devices in our pocket where we have the sum to that total of humanity's knowledge and free global video communications. But like, for instance, the way we educate our kids hasn't changed. We have a teacher of variable quality spewing facts to kids of variable quality at the lowest common denominator. That makes no sense. I mean, we're gonna have AI teach the kids exactly the maximum of their capacity, and we, the humans, are not gonna be teachers anymore. We're gonna be coaches. We're gonna be helping them, et cetera. So people are gonna find in their free time to do things to do where they get value. And humans love social hierarchies, right? Like, so we always try to find something in which we're the best at, whatever this niche is. Whether I'm playing League of Legends or collecting stamps or playing in my local D&D game, whatever niche interests you have, your people are going to find something that allows them to be differentiated and be themselves. Now, then again, look, I've taken psychedelics. I've had many non-dual experiences, and I really believe like our purpose here is to just be ourselves. And by virtue of just being yourself, you're already of service to others. Like by being a good friend, by being a good parent, by having whatever interests you have and bringing your curiosity and passion and energy to those around you, that is enough. That is of service. And some people are called to do more at a large scale. Some people are not, but there's no judgment. Like this is all a game. This is all a video game, and we're playing the game of life.
Excellent. So I'm going to go back to questions which are more in today's world. So let's see. Yes, so it's becoming easier for mid-sized retailers to open marketplaces, particularly to monetize non-purchasing traffic with additional inventory. And I think the question is, do you see a limit with this type of marketplace?
Well, many market. So first of all, normal retailers that are like have brands and inventory, it's actually not super easy for them to manage third-party inventory because the KP the KPIs and OKRs that make them best at inventory management and turning around, et cetera, are pretty different from like picking the right suppliers, making sure that the NPS remains high even though they're not controlling the experience, having managing the either payments or returns or whatever on behalf of third parties. So there's an entire skill set that needs to happen. And yes, Amazon has clearly done it right? Like Amazon used to be 100% first party, and now the majority is third party. But it's not that easy for many first party marketplaces to have third party and become good at it. But if you can, it's great. Like I'm an investor in a handbag market company called Rebag, and they historically would buy users use whatever Birkin handbag, and then they would detail it, clean it, and resell it. And so of course they held inventory. Now they found a number of professional qualified sellers that they're willing to let on the platform without themselves taking inventory, et cetera. Now the margin is lower, but also the cost of sourcing them is a lot lower. But in that world, you need to be very careful who you let on the platform. So for some people, it makes sense. For others, it doesn't. But the KPIs and OKRs that are required to succeed are different from the one of your core business. So make sure you have the right people to manage this.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple more questions, but I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. Fabrice, if you would be so kind to answer the questions in the chat, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for a fascinating discussion. It's been great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's now move to our next panel, Agentic Commerce, when AI becomes the customer. So here's where we are. AI is already deeply embedded in shopping. 300 million Amazon customers used Rufus last year. Shopping queries on ChatGPT have jumped from 9% to 14% of all sessions in a year. And nearly half of US shoppers say they use AI to help them buy. Now, most of it is still AI-assisted shopping. So a human is browsing, asking for advice, and making the final call. So truly agentic commerce, when an AI agent searches, compares, negotiates, and buys on your behalf, is still embryonic. The infrastructure is being built. So Visa, MasterCard, and American Express are all developing agent-to-agent payment rails, but we are not quite there yet. So what happens if an agent is the customer? What needs to happen for someone to trust an agent to make a purchase on their behalf? Who is accountable when your agent makes a bad decision? So this is exactly what we're going to explore today. But before we jump into the panel, I'd like to get a sense of the room. And so I've got a couple of quick polls for you. So would you trust an AI agent to make a purchase on your behalf? Yes, for routing purchases. Yes, even for bigger purchases, if I set the parameters. Not yet. I like to review before it buys. And no, I want to stay in control of every purchase. So that's the first poll. And the second one, when do you think AI agents will routinely make purchases on behalf of customers? It's already happening within 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, 10 plus years, or never. So I'll let you vote for another few seconds. So interestingly, on the first question, 71% are not ready yet. They would want to review before the agent buys. And 57% think that AI agents would routinely make purchases on behalf of customers within 1 to 2 years. It's very interesting results. Okay, so let's keep these numbers in mind as we go through the panel. So let me introduce our panelists. I am joined today by Singh, who's partner at Speedinvest. Samir invests in network effect businesses and sees how founders are navigating the AI shift. Yash Kanoria, so professor at Columbia Business School, where his research focuses on marketplace design and matching markets. His recent work on how AI shopping agents interact with platforms is one of the first rigorous studies in this space. And last but not least, Anne-Claire Baschet is Chief Data and AI Officer at Mirakl, the leading enterprise marketplace platform. Anne-Claire oversees Mirakl's AI strategy and works with many large platforms. So let me start with you, Yash. You've written an academic paper about how agents shop. It's entitled, "What is your AI agent buying? Evaluation, biases, model dependence, and emerging implications for agentic e-commerce." So before we dive into the findings of the paper, could you help us define what an AI agent is? And I know you've also built a simulator where we can see AI agents shop in real time. So it'd be great if you could show us what happens when you ask different AI models to buy the same product and how their choices differ.
Good. Hi, Laure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm intrigued to hear the perspectives of Anne-Claire and Samir as well through this discussion. Of course, excited to share my research as an academic. That's always exciting. You asked about defining AI agents, so that's pretty broad. I think we have a sense what they are, but uh, I think the distinction between just AI assistants and AI tools of a year or two back and what people are calling agents is that they take on longer, more extended tasks and try to complete that segment or that task in a more end-to-end fashion. And oftentimes this is not happening real time because it takes them a while to collect the information, parse it, and so on. So in the context of coming to the e-commerce context that we want to discuss here, right? Uh, I think there's two kinds of AI assistants. Even before we talk about agents, right? There's two kinds of AI assistants. There's the obvious one where I go and talk to my favorite chatbot about some purchase that I want help with, right? But there is also something which is under the radar. So even the traditional customer funnel, which might involve searching on Google or on Amazon in the search bar as usual, right? Now is actually being infused. The results are pretty strongly infused with Gen AI behind the scenes. Okay, so Gen AI is actually playing a role. There is AI assistance happening even for shoppers who are following the traditional funnel, and this is happening now and will accelerate. Okay, so this is my sense. Now about the agentic thing. Okay, so this is very much in its infancy in e-commerce, but in this context, it would be me asking my AI tool in an agentic form to go out. Maybe it will help me with discovery, right? Maybe potentially also with comparison and maybe with selection. But it's going to go out, search the web, open up relevant websites. It's going to parse the product display, look at the product pages, read the detailed description, and then maybe try to reason through the options. and help me compare and choose. Okay, so that's how I would describe agentic e-commerce. Now you asked about the paper, and before that you wanted to see the simulator, right? So I will pull that up in just a second. Let me just tell you what we were interested in. Okay, so this project started about a year ago, and the question we were interested in is, can we understand the choice behavior of these AI tools if I ask them to go out and compare and choose on my behalf, right? And one can imagine deploying a tool from your favorite frontier lab, whether it is ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and saying, hey, like, find me a tube of toothpaste or find me a fitness watch. And letting it go to a website like Amazon or Etsy and look for the relevant item. This comes with a downside for somebody who's looking for a scientific answer, because we were interested in how it makes trade-offs between different attributes, whether it's price or rating or platform tags or the position of the product in the display. And when it makes a choice on a website in the wild, you don't know what is driving that choice. And in some sense, you're fundamentally limited in not being able to disentangle what is causing the choice. You can ask it, but you can take its answer with a pinch of salt, right? The explanation doesn't always match the actual choice behavior, something we found. So what we did is we took a different approach. We said we'll make our own mock marketplace. It's necessarily very simple, right? But it allows us to control the individual listing positions and characteristics, and then we can actually see, hey, if I modify this price, I change this platform tag, how does this impact the choice behavior? Okay, so this is that simulator that you were talking about. Let me just show it to folks. So let me try sharing my screen. Perfect. So do you see this product display here?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is a mock website that we built, okay? And you can make certain choices. It's a simulator, as we were talking about. So you can choose which category you're interested in. You can let loose a GenAI model of your choice. Here we have just 3 prototypical examples. And you can choose the prompt mode. I'll be just demoing the default prompt. I think, Laure, were you going to share the link as well on Zoom? Or should I put it in? So if people want to play, they can also.
Yes. Yes. So Justin has shared the link on Zoom as well, so people can play with it as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So you can also try this out. I'm going to go with the default prompt, but you can pick one of the others. And if you want to write your own prompt, you can do that. It's just going to take a minute or two to respond, because these models are pretty slow in parsing this type of display. Okay, so fitness watch, I asked GPT 4.1, hey, you're my shopping assistant, use your best judgment and select one of these 8 products to purchase for me. Okay, it's as simple as that, obviously simplified, but it allows us to see what exactly is going on. Okay, so I hit run simulator, and I see GPT 4.1 has picked the Fitbit Versa fitness smartwatch, which appears here in the top left. Okay, so now I try the same exact thing with GPT-5. It has the same display, right? And I simulate, and its response is to pick a different smartwatch, the Garmin Vivo Active 5. Okay, so already different models from the same provider are making different choices. And then I try this third model, which is Claude 4.5 Opus. And this picks yet another product. It's the Fitbit Inspire 3. Okay, so now there's obviously model dependence. Now let's do one more little test. Okay, so this time I'm going to play with something in the display. I'm going back to GPT 4.1, which had picked the Fitbit Versa. I'm going to shuffle the listing positions. So the same listings, I'm going to move them around without changing any contents of the listings. I'll shuffle it. Okay, so now that Fitbit Versa has shown up here and everything has moved around. I hit run simulator. And the same model confronted with the same listings has made a different choice. Okay, so it has picked the Garmin Forerunner 55. So this is very interesting, and you might suspect, hey, why is this happening? Is it that it likes the position in the top left, right? I'll just stop sharing my screen at this moment because now we can maybe let it be on for a minute. So does it like the position in the top left? Is it something about the product, right? If I shuffle it again, and I again hit run simulator, it's now picked the Fitbit Versa, which has now appeared here. So there's something going on and we wanted to understand it. And what we did was to run some randomized experiments, right? And just see like which characteristics are driving the choice behavior. And just to give you a small taste, I don't want to hog the floor here, but GPT 4.1 actually has a strong bias for the top left position. It will pick it, all else being equal, 3 times more often than you would expect at random. Now, you might ask, is this because humans also favor the top left? Well, the contemporaneous Claude model does not favor the top left. I think it was top center. The contemporaneous Gemini model also has a different position bias. I think it was to the top right, if I remember it. Now, you might say, is it because of the provider? Well, the next GPT model, we saw GPT-5 in action, has a very different position bias. It has a bias, it's very different. GPT 5.1 has a strong position bias to the bottom right. Okay, in some sense, exactly the opposite of GPT 4.1. Okay, so now at this point, your head may be swimming with all the things that I'm saying. This kind of weirdness extends to things like how much do they care about ratings or price, right? Or platform tags. Some of the GPT 5.x models, they care about ratings twice as much as their predecessors. Okay, so this was very interesting to us to just observe, to think about why it's happening and what are the potential consequences. So that's a little taste, and maybe more as the opportunity presents itself.
Excellent. So you're basically showing us that agents currently don't browse and don't shop the way that humans do today. So, I mean, Anne-Claire and Samir, any reactions about Yash's experiment? Is that consistent with your experience or expectations? Shall I start with you, Anne-Claire?
Yes, so first of all, I think I was one of the first to read your paper. So that's great to be together like 9 months after. I think it was released in June or July last year. So during July, at the same time at Mirakl, we were doing research trying to understand the same thing, how agents are choosing to recommend a product or another. So that typically resonates with what we were seeing. And at the same time, what we've identified also as another challenge is now that agents are choosing products, how do they really do the recommendation? Because the task they have to solve is not anymore what search engine has to solve, a keyword like, I don't know, smartwatch. But they have like a problem expressed with many, many words. There is a recent study from Forrester saying that on ChatGPT, on average, now people are typing 23 words in their prompt. So, and we were trying to understand at the same time what will make an agent prefer a product because it helped him to better choose and solve the problem of the user. And so thanks to your study, we iterate at the same time between models, improving titles and description. And we are on the same path now. Each time there is a new model, there is a challenge to rewrite title and description in a way that is very descriptive for agents and well-performing. But at the same time, agents, they are delegated a task that is more solving a problem or reaching a purpose. Like I would take an example I had last week. I need to attend a business cocktail in New York. My luggage is late. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to wear for tomorrow evening, and I need to have a big business cocktail dress for an event with customers. And typically, in the way today marketplace and retailers and brands structure product data, they are not always giving the structured information that will help an agent to decide. Concretely, in this example, would be something that is delivered in I don't know, financial district in Manhattan this afternoon, Or this is something that is long dress, so it's perfect for a business cocktail. When you are human, you can see it. And what we've learned, in addition to the learnings in the paper, is if you help to structure text data with occasion, purpose, FAQ, that will help the agent to do the recommendation. It's helping a lot to pick this product rather than another one that don't have this additional information and that this additional attributes. So there is a real edge on providing structured data and structured data that are making the job of the agent easier, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Anne-Claire. What about you, Samir?
There's a lot of things to get into, but I'll focus on one particular point that Yash mentioned that I thought was really interesting, which was the position bias of the models. That's obviously kind of odd, right? Because humans, you would assume, wouldn't have necessarily a position bias when they're scrolling shopping. You're evaluating the price, you're evaluating the picture, the visuals matter, the product category matters, but that's not happening. So when you look at the actual technology, how do agents actually work? At the heart, an agent is a coding model. And how they actually been built up, first you had sort of a token predictor, a large language model at the heart of it. And on top of that, you have reinforcement learning with a ton of coding data. And the thing with coding data is the reason coding models are so good at what they do, specifically on coding, is that coding is very easy to verify if something is right or wrong, right? There's tons of examples of syntax, there's tons of examples of right code, right result, wrong result. You can compile the code to see if it runs. So there's ways to figure out if it is right or if it is wrong. And then you kind of get the coding agent to run on your computer to get it to do another task. Tasks for which, unfortunately, there isn't enough training data. Because let's say you have a user shopping for a particular product, and there's 10 different users shopping for the same product. All 10 of them would have different priorities, correct? And so there's no reliable way to predict what was the right task and what was the wrong task. The way reinforcement learning works is, let's say you get an AI model to play a game and lots of different outcomes happen. And one of the times it gets something right and wins the game. And the way reinforcement learning works is you ask the model, the one that got that right, trace back your sequence of events and just upweight everything you did. Which could be right, which could be wrong. Some of those steps could be right, could be a longer way to get there, but that's largely how it works. And it works in a game and coding kind of environment because you can define this was the right outcome, this was the wrong outcome. You can't do that in shop. And that's kind of why at least my assumption is that you have this position bias because that wasn't specifically designed by the technology creators.
Very interesting. So, Anne-Claire, you're working with dozens of marketplaces right now. What's your views on agentic commerce and what are the views of your clients right now?
So I think the first there is yin and yang reaction. I think the first one was fear about disintermediation, about what has happened in travels and in hotels and so on is going to happen to retail. And I want to still have the relation with the customer. I still want to be able to promote what makes the differentiation of my brand, to continue to have this relation. And I think this was the first reaction when Perplexity launched their agentic commerce approach in October 2024, when the retailers and the brands were no longer the merchant of record, and that was a problem for them. So obviously, the protocols that OpenAI and then after Google launch with retailers, Agentic Commerce Protocol and Universal Commerce Protocol, bring, I would say, more clarity toward the ecosystem. With now, no, you still receive the payment, you still are having the customer data, you still are able to engage in a relation with them. And so I think now everyone is seeing that it's something that is not tech-led, but that is more a technology that is enabling to solve what people are really doing. They are never entering a physical store saying running shoes to a human in front of them. So they see more the challenge, and I would say the priority of everyone now is two things. The first one is improve their what they call discoverability on this agent and LLM, how they could be more visible, and that is expressed by two new keywords that are GO, Generative Engine Optimization, and AEO, or Agent Engine Optimization. That requires different elements, strong SEO foundation, having outside US, or if they are not connected to this LLM, a strong structure of their websites, linked to the research paper we just mentioned before, but as well requires two new things. So the first one is to invest in what is called more their brand authority. Outside their ecosystem, when these agents have to make a decision, they are like, oh, this brand, it's like a stranger. I have to know outside, don't trust him only by what he's saying on his ecosystem, but look at outside and see if I can believe him. And then after, the other elements I was mentioning is to have like a strong data product content that is more matching the problem they have to solve. And the other thing is, so I would say they are like looking at discoverability in a way that is okay, it's growing fast. It's maybe today less than 1, 2, or 3% of my traffic, but it's growing and it's driving me also higher conversion than classical referral traffic. So on average, it was 38% in the Adobe study during Black Friday. Shopify released a study saying 45% of additional conversion from this AI affiliation traffic. And that is what we are seeing over all of our customers, and sometimes even higher. And the second thing, so they are considering how could I leverage and be more visible as this, in a way, off-site experience, because this is the way, and there will be this inflection point between traditional search and AI search. So I need to be there, and in a way, it's like the beginning of SEO. It's free, so let's go over there. And the second element is more a deep thinking about it's a new standard of experience. So how could I improve my own experience to be more agentic? And what does that mean? So everyone is at the first stage, crafting shopping agents, learning also the hardware that sometimes they do not have the assortment, even if they have a successful marketplace or platform strategy, and seeing new problems about how could I really match this demand of the shopper that is now expressed in a way that is more granular than ever. Before it was more filters and keywords, even on site. Now I have really this specific demand, unique, I would say, of every customer. So we had like the fear, then the FOMO, and now we are more like, okay, it's something that is growing fast. How could we structure this strategy in more off-site strategy visibility, and then on-site and having an agentic experience, and starting to see the big challenges it represents for operation. And I think no one is all in, saying I will put all my product sellable on that, and no one is really all in about want to have transaction outside their ecosystem, more trying to say, okay, how could I start to experiment? So at Mirakl, we built a partnership with Stripe, but also with JP Morgan, to make it easier for retailers and brands to start to experiment. And what is interesting is some of them, with the first element of improving their discoverability, they are learning that it's a good way for them to capture new segment of customers, like they were not capturing before. One of our customers is Adorama in New York, in the US, and they have been highlighted in the latest Similar Web white paper on the top 3 on agentic commerce in their white paper, top 3 in the segment of electronics, at the same top 3 as Best Buy, and they are smaller, because they are really seeing that as an opportunity to capture new segment of customer, and start early to have a strong strategy. But on checkout, I would say everyone is like, what's the value? What's the value for me? If it's to capture new customers and if it's interesting and they are buying again, that's great. If it's more, I would say, destroying value and not having a great after-sales experience, let's not be all in and let's learn step by step.
So let me turn to you, Samir. As an investor, what traction do you see with startups? I mean, agentic commerce is still in the very early days. So what's your take on agentic commerce?
So first, I'd say we need to be specific about what agentic commerce is. Are people searching for products using LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini? Yes, yes. Are they doing product research on that? Yes. Are they making purchases through their LLM? No, that's not happening as of today. And we've seen this before where the research reports sort of forecasting, making 5-year forecasts of things that aren't happening. And so I have come across a fair number of startups that claim to be involved with agentic commerce in some way, shape, or form, whether that's, an agentic travel booking engine for hotels or for flights. How much traction do these companies have? None. There is zero traction I have not come across a single agentic commerce startup that has meaningful number of users.
And do you know why that is?
I'd break it down into two segments of why it's not happening. The first one's a roadblock. The second one is just I don't know if there's a fix for this. It's kind of like, let's say you walk into a restaurant and you sit down and the waiter comes and asks you, what will you have? And the first question you're going to ask is, can I have a menu? You don't want to have a conversation with the waiter of what you can do. You want to have a menu and point to the things that you want, because having a menu of options reduces the amount of cognitive load on the user. And that's kind of how shopping works, right? So on the internet, you scroll through lists of products. You might have like a keyword or a category you have in mind, then you go scroll through your options and go, this one. I'd like to learn more about this one. Whereas on a text-based interface, that is pretty high friction. And if you look at how LLMs work today, I'm going to go, hey, tell me sort of the best recommendations for a smartwatch. And I get a bunch of text and I have a conversation about it. That's significantly higher friction. And so that works when you have a lot of cognitive load of, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what sort of smartwatches exist. Like, help me narrow down my choices. Like, that's where that works. Where LLMs work well in terms of a user interfaces, they lower cognitive load from a high cognitive load task, like writing a long draft, like generating media, like writing code, right? It's a whole lot easier to send a few lines to LLM, get him to do. But once you have like a rough idea of what you want that menu to scroll, and that's not something LLMs are good at. So fundamentally, that's one big road. The second roadblock that people don't talk about as much is that people just assume that agents in particular are software, right? So once software is implemented, so let's say Google as a search engine, you built a search engine, your cost of serving a new user is minimal. It doesn't really matter. You can scale this company up without any challenges. That's not how LLMs work. Coding models, which are the heart of agents, are the most compute-intensive technology built in history. And the end result of that is the amount of investment that is going into the technology supply chain for this has caused major shortages and price inflation. So for the first time in 50 years, computing technology is inflationary, not deflationary. And because of this, over the last couple of months, you've had companies getting sticker shock as to how much this actually costs when they try to push AI adoption across the organization. Now, keeping those economics in mind, the assumption behind agentic commerce is that an end user will be able to run an autonomous agent on their phone without paying anything for it. So who exactly is paying for the agent? The marginal costs are massive. The capex requirements are massive. This is just not economically viable.
Okay, it's very interesting. So a number of technical issues and then also commercial issues that you see going forward. So I think I'm going to turn to Anne-Claire first and then to Yash then. So Anne-Claire, so if you're running a marketplace today or even an e-commerce site, so what should you be doing right now to overcome the challenges that Samir has exposed?
So I would say there will be several stages, as Samir was describing in agentic commerce. Agentic commerce is really the ability to delegate discovery, purchase, and after sales, really end to end in commerce to an agent. We are not ready now. It's starting with discovery, then after for purchase, maybe delegation to payment on agent to agent world. But the first thing is consider that the rules of commerce are still true. It's still having right price with the right level of service and matching the demand of the customer. So that's still really true. So what we see is the first thing is still invest drastically on what makes a good retailer even better tomorrow than yesterday. We've run recently a study for one of Mirakl customer in the US that launched almost 1 year ago their marketplace. And we've measured with them their mention rate with a metrics that is obviously not perfect, but at least the same one for them and all the competitors. And what we see is thanks to their successful marketplace strategy to increase their assortment, never be out of stock, also compete transparently in price with their own 1P product, they were able to improve their visibility of 24 points on their mention rate on ChatGPT. That just put them the first one in their category. On top, even more mentioned than the product of Walmart and Amazon. So that's very successful, and that still is you need to have the product that is available with the right level of service. And there is like new challenge that are stronger than before. The supply chain and the fulfillment, because in this protocol, agents are asking transparency about the estimated delivery dates. After, for sure, they will organically recommend the one that are really processing on time on their delivery. And the second thing is, I hope, but if not, it's never too late to work on the strong data foundation. Because if product data are scrappy, it will not help agents. Humans can make efforts on one single product if they prefer the brand. The real risk is agents are going to pass. And so curation and the structured data foundation for retailers and marketplace is definitely not an option to have the full potential of the first pillar.
Mm. And so, Yash, in your paper, you call for continuous auditing of agent behavior. Should platforms be building their own testing frameworks? And what would this look like in practice?
Perfect. Yes, I think evaluation is a major theme that emerges from what we found, which was very surprising to me at multiple stages, right? Like the findings were surprising enough that I said, hey, we don't know where it will go, right? Partly for the reason that Samir described, right? There is not one right answer. You cannot easily deploy reinforcement learning on this problem. So you need to keep evaluating and be on top of, at least understand what's happening, and then you can think how you want to react to it. So I think, yes, platforms should be having their own automatic evaluation pipelines. And I think many of them might already be building that or have that. This is my sense. They are not the only ones, though. I think the model creators, if and when they start to care about e-commerce, right, that comes and goes, I think they're not able to figure out certain aspects yet. But I think they should be concerned. Regulators might want to take note, right? Sellers have to have their own automatic pipelines for their listing optimization and re-optimization and targeting for different AI shoppers. And Clever's was alluding to some of that. I'm actually very curious what Mirakl is doing to enable this for their SMB customers and so on, right? Because obviously these SMB customers don't have like a bunch of scientists and software engineers dedicated to this stuff. So I think evaluation is really important. What would that look like, right? I think fundamental to this, sellers, I just mentioned sellers need to have their own pipeline. So fundamental to the evaluation is a database of user contexts or queries, right? This may organically be collected by a seller, by a provider like Mirakl, like Shopify, right? Or by a large platform, right? You need to be able to simulate like what would that AI tool, given that particular query or context, actually do when it is deployed in your in your way of reaching the customer, whether it's the platform or you're reaching the customer on your own website. And you will see things like, hey, sure, this tool is not supposed to decide for the customer, but maybe it's recommending in a certain order. It's giving that menu in a certain order. Am I showing up on that menu? Right? That's the first thing. And am I showing up high on that menu? And based on that, I can try to change the things. If I'm a seller, that's what I care about. The platform will care about platform health. There are a variety of metrics, right? And they will say, hey, is my platform actually operating in a healthy way? For example, am I able to drive traffic not just to 5 top sellers but also to a few more? That's just one example, right? But there's a variety of platform health metrics. And these questions and their answers are super important, and these answers are, I think, basically volatile from one model to the next. We saw brands rising and falling just abruptly with a new model release. Products are abruptly rising and falling. Certainly, there are things they can control. Okay, so this is to Anne Claire's point, and they should, right? So being on top of your brand authority and on top of your listings data and having it up to date, all these things are important. But there's some idiosyncratic component to this. So if you don't even know what's happening, then what are you going to do about it, right? So the first step is evaluation for all the stakeholders involved.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the questions. There was actually one comment, let's say, from Neil. Do agents have the same need for marketplaces to aggregate supply? They are unfazed by the hard work of aggregating the supply themselves. And I think that's perhaps a question for Yash. If I seem to remember from your paper, agents have biases in the sense that they converge, so they don't browse the way humans do, which I think is different from the way a good marketplace works, which is to distribute demand across the long tail. Would you like to take this one, Yash?
Yeah, I think I'll say a little bit, right? I think and others can chime in if they have something to share. We did see some concentration happening. We did not compare with the concentration with humans, but we did see some concentration. And the thing is, this is not going to be unique to the shopper. It's unique to the model, and a Gemini model or a ChatGPT model might be used by such a large swath of shoppers that if certain products and brands are prominent, that will lift them, right? For all the shoppers who are open to options. And if some brand or product has somehow become invisible to that model, it is going to push it down. So we got like some initial evidence that there is some of this happening. Uh, so folks have to be like just buckle in. I think they need to buckle in for some of these kinds of things and see what best they can do, because there will be opportunities as well as challenges, right? And they will come and go in these phases. It's not obvious. It's not obvious that you can take, if you're not a frontier model, it's not obvious that you can go in and get it to behave the way you want based on your prompt, right? These things don't always just care about, if I say, hey, recommend a diversity of products, it might not be as simple as that to spread the demand out and so on.
So thank you. Thank you all. It's been a really interesting panel for sure. Certainly, we've learned that definitions are extremely important. And I think the question now is what should agents or AI agents be allowed to do, and who's responsible for when something goes wrong? So I'm now going to hand over to the next panel, who's going to talk about regulation. And I'm going to hand over to Jebelli, the chair of our regulation panel. So Kay, over to you.
Great. So thanks everyone who's dialing in to watch this. I'm just going to do some quick introductions, and then we'll give you an overview of what's going on AI regulation, as well as some compliance tips, industry perspective, and a little bit of a look to what's ahead. So first, I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Alexandre de Streel, Professor of European Law at the University of Namur. Alex is one of the leading academic voices on digital regulation these days, especially in Brussels, competition policy and platform governance. And he also serves as academic director at CER, the Center on Regulation in Europe. His work sits exactly at the intersection of today's discussion, how Europe can regulate powerful digital technologies in ways that are principled, effective, and still open to innovation, and indeed how other jurisdictions are doing it as well. And in particular, that's where we're joined by Giulio Coraggio, partner at DLA Piper. He brings deep practical experience advising companies on technology, data, cybersecurity, internet, and e-commerce law, with more than 2 decades working with Italian and multinational businesses. And that makes him especially well placed to speak about the real-world compliance challenges companies are facing as AI regulation moves from legislative text to boardroom decisions, product design, and deployment. Lastly, we have Catherine Chappell, who is counsel in the Competition Advisory and Regulatory Affairs team at Google. Catherine brings the perspective of a company deploying and governing frontier technologies at scale while navigating a fast-evolving global regulatory environment. Her role is particularly relevant to today's discussion because agentic AI will test not only existing competition and consumer protection frameworks, but also the practical question of how firms build accountable systems in markets that are moving very quickly. So first off, let me hand it off to Giulio. Could you perhaps give us an outline of the US, EU, and UK approaches to AI regulation?
Thanks, Kay, for the introduction. Great to be here with Alex and Catherine. And it's going to be a very interesting policy conversation. So when it comes to AI regulation, the main point is that there is no global approach to rules on artificial intelligence. There is a kind of a patchwork of 3 distinct philosophies shaped by different legal traditions, state-industry relationships, and views on risks. All speak about responsible AI, but then they have different approaches. Let's start from the EU. Actually, today is a very important day because the European Parliament approved what is called the Digital Omnibus. These are measures that are going to simplify the provisions of the UA Act and postpone some of their terms. We will speak about it later on. But it's a sort of acknowledgement by the European Union that the regulatory framework put in place 3 years ago was too burdensome and was risking to delay the growth of artificial intelligence. Actually, this is one of the very limited cases where basically legislation has come into place before the hype of the technology. The European Union has a risk-based ex-ante regime. So basically, the obligations are parametered to the level of risk as represented by the regulators. And so the obligations for low risks systems, AI systems, are very basic. When it comes to high risk systems, then the technical documentation, the human oversight, the transparency obligations, and the data governance obligations are really quite severe. But most of the obligations, again, are on the providers. So those that work that control the machine, as opposed to the deployers that are the companies exploiting that solution. But be careful, because if you have an AI technology and you heavily customize that solution to your company's needs, then you need to be requalified. And then this regime needs to be seen in a context of a stream of digital regulations that came into place during the last years. So on top of the GDPR that made its 10th birthday this year, last month, then we have the Data Act, the Digital Markets Act, then all the different legislation on cybersecurity like DORA and NIS2. And so it's really a mess because you cannot just consider the UAI Act. You need to have a system that considers all the different regulations that can come into place. When it comes to the US, the approach is totally different. We have no comprehensive federal AI legislation. We have a sector by sector and agency by agency legislation. So we have the FDA that introduce legislation for medical device systems. Then we have the FTC for consumer protection, the CFPB for financial services, and so on. So the underlying philosophy is that the market is going to self-regulate. So we need to foster innovation, and regulation might delay the exploitation of this technology and might kind of create a competitive burden that would delay the growth of US companies as opposed, for instance, to the Chinese peers. So this is really the battle on AI that is currently in place. The Biden administration had set some rules, but obviously Mr. Trump canceled all these measures, and now we are in a kind of a gray situation. Some sort of certification was announced but then postponed, and now we have a state-by-state legislation in a situation where basically the US has an enormous market influence on the growth of artificial intelligence because the main AI providers are based there. So basically, they are setting the standards and they are influencing legislators. So what's happening in the EU basically is the result of a considerable pressure by the US government and US companies on the EU. We will see how situations will evolve. Obviously, the EU wants to create its own AI champion, but we're still not there. When it comes to the UK, it's a kind of an in-between situation. There is a sort of principle-based approach. There are sectoral regulators, the ICO for privacy, the FCA, the Ofcom, the CMA, and so on. Again, there is a light touch approach as in the US, but at least there is some legislation on safety, security, fairness, accountability, and so on. Regulatory flexibility is preferred over legislation because they acknowledge that regulations cannot keep pace with the technological environment. Let's remember that the AI is so fresh. And then there are the big questions whether these open principles are enough. So in summary, just basically, the EU is setting the rules with the goal of becoming a kind of global standard. They are not there. The AI Act is not the GDPR. We will see how it evolves. The US is kind of adopting an approach where the market is going to set its own rules. But we have seen already some situations where that wasn't enough. The UK is trying to find a flexible approach that can quickly adjust on how the AI is gonna evolve. That never. It's a kind of an unknown territory. Just let's remember what the AI agents are doing in the businesses across the globe, where like 12 months ago, no one was talking about them. And this is honestly the biggest threat for any sort of business or administration, in my view. I'm sure that these tensions are exactly what Alex and Catherine will explore in during this session. I hand it over to you, Alex.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone. So yes, after this panorama, this international panorama, let's deep dive a little bit on the EU situation, which is indeed, as Giulio was just explaining, probably of the three the most stringent. And basically, I would say that the overall philosophy or rationale behind what is called now the EU Digital Rulebook, which includes the AI Act that Giulio mentioned, the Digital Market Act that was also mentioned, is referred to DSA and so on. I mean, there are, it depends how you count, but around 50 instruments which are related to one way or another to AI agent. But I think the philosophy behind is, and that's important to understand, or the legal compass, if you want, is openness and non-discrimination. And why do we want openness and non-discrimination? To promote innovation. And now, and that's a new issue a new consideration that Giulio mentioned, tech sovereignty, because the thing is that if you are a small players, in general, you need access to the big ecosystem to promote your own innovation. And I like, to make the parallel with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is clearly a disruptor in US politics. And Donald Trump's needed the Republican Party, the access to the Republican Party platform to be elected. I don't think that with The Apprentice, it would have been enough, So basically, I think, because often, those kind of openness law are seen as anti innovation. I think it's the exact contrary. Now, of course, it depends on how it is implemented. So I wouldn't say that I would take for granted that those laws are perfect and will for sure lead to innovation. But I think that's their spirit, that's their rationale. And the second thing I want to push also back against is that those laws are sometimes presented by Trump himself as anti-American. And I don't think that that is true at all, or protectionist. I don't think it's true at all. I think the goal is to promote innovation wherever they are coming from. And, if you look now at the main beneficiary of those openness law, they are American firms, So I wouldn't say that it's anti-innovation or it's anti-American. To the contrary, but I guess we can discuss that, and I'm sure that maybe some of the panelists will not necessarily fully agree with this. Now let's go to the AI agent and how they fit within the EU Digital Rulebook, And here, we really face, as always, as the regulator are always facing in new technology, the pacing problem, not to intervene too early, because then you will kill innovation or reduce innovation, but not intervene too late, because then it's too late and you cannot reverse the market towards more openness, And so that's a really difficult dilemma that the regulator has to face. And it's a new one. It has even a name, the Colin Dridge dilemma. And Colin Dridge was a technologist, and he said, when change is easy, the need for it cannot be foreseen. But when the need for change is apparent, change has become expensive, difficult, and time-consuming. So really, you have a pacing problem. And the thing is that there is a perception in Europe, rightly or wrongly, but that's the perception of the European regulator, that in the platform economy, they intervene too late, and that's why it's so complicated to reverse to more competition and more openness. Now, whether the AI agent has the same characteristic of the platform economy, and whether this assessment that we intervene too late in the platform economy needs to be discussed, and that's maybe what we want to do here and elsewhere. But I think that's the basis of the problem, and not to intervene, not too early, not too late. And I would say that given the past experience, the European regulatory authority are particularly cautious of intervening too late, Now, if there is a need for intervention, and again, that needs to be discussed, the question is what needs to be done and with which legal instrument in the panoply of the digital rulebook. And I would say I see at least two streams of action that I think are needed and that we can see happening in Europe. The first is to ensure that the market is working well and that there is a competition among AI agents. Now, there is a competition today That's undeniable. And the question is whether it will remain, because remember, with the platform economy, you also had a competition at the beginning. There was this famous quote, the competition is one click away. So I think that we have to be sure that this competition continue to be. And for that, I would say we need probably some interoperability obligation, some data sharing obligation, because they are in AI agent a data feedback loop. So mostly those two things, interoperability and data sharing. And this is exactly what the Commission is working on now with Google. And so that's great to have Catherine just after me, because the Commission is now in the process of specifying, putting a little bit more legal clarity on some of the DMA obligation related to vertical interoperability and related to search data sharing. And why the Commission is so concerned with search data sharing, I don't think to help the existing search engine like Bing or DuckDuckGo, but it's to be sure that the competition remain within AI agent between Gemini and others and others AI agent. Okay, so I think that's one thing. The second issue is in terms of protecting consumer, because yes, if the market is working well, the market will protect consumer. But the issue is whether the market will work well, and if the market is not working well, then maybe, or not perfectly, then we would need probably some form of consumer protection. And there I would say that the first thing is awareness, that we understand, and transparency, that we understand how the selection in the AI agent, it was discussed in the previous panel, how what they propose to you is selected, to be sure in a way that the AI agents work for the consumer and not for the company operating the AI agent. And maybe, but I wouldn't claim that it is needed. No, but this is something to keep in check. Maybe at some point, if everything else do not work, to have some fiduciary duty on the AI agent, as we have, in financial regulation, to be sure that in a way the financial advisor is loyal to you and not loyal to his company or to someone paying the agent, the financial agent. So I think we can learn a lot from what has happened in financial regulation to here. And finally, and that's my last point, one thing which is extremely important, and on which the European Commission is working, is to have more consistency among the different pieces of the EU Digital Rulebook. Because we have a lot, Giulio mentioned some, but as I said, there are nearly 50 law. It's very, and with a number of regulator, and Draghi in his report on competitiveness of Europe has counted that there is more than 270 regulators at the European level or the member states level in charge of this EU digital rulebook, 270. So that's quite a lot. It's a lot of job for a lot of people in Europe, but it's very important that they work consistently with each other, and that's unfortunately not always the case. And we see that, for instance, in the context of the ongoing specification decision on the Android ecosystem, you could see that you have the competition people who have a certain view, the privacy people who may have another view, the security people who have a third view. No, I wouldn't say that those are necessarily incompatible, but it's very important that there is a discussion among all those interests and the regulator, protecting those interests, to be sure that on the one hand, the regulation which is imposed on Google is consistent across those all laws, and also that it is effective and can protect competition, privacy, security, and so on. Okay, so I think that in a nutshell, I think yes, Europe is probably the most stringent regulator, so it's a very interesting regulatory experimentation to observe. I think that we have good premises, which is innovation, openness for innovation. The question is whether indeed we will deliver this, and that is, what we have to check.
Thanks, Alex. That's quite a strong supportive position on the European approach. And at the same time, I see in the comments about this kind of in contrast, the US approach, which is a little bit more abrupt with this recent national security concerns being a reason to tell Anthropic not to export the Mythos model. And that kind of approach maybe isn't as good. Obviously not for business either, because then Anthropic decided to withhold the model completely. So that kind of uncertainty is difficult, and dealing with uncertainty and advising business. Catherine, you have some sense of what that's like, and also what the practical compliance challenges are with, for example, the EU approach. Please.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here. So it's right. Predictability is just such an important thing when you're advising business teams for building these technologies. What are the rules in different jurisdictions around the world? How will these products kind of operate in a compliant way? And when we think about agents, I mean, I really see it as it's a new technology layer. They are by definition orchestrators. They're interacting across systems, search engines, operating systems, cloud services, third-party applications, kind of simultaneously. And so with such a fluid, interconnected system, it can make it difficult to know how to comply, where there's sort of more static compliance rules. And one of the biggest challenges is the complexity of mapping multiple overlapping regimes onto these kind of fast evolving systems. But I think that there is, pretty broad agreement on objectives. I agree with Alexandre that, the key goals of openness and innovation, but so much of the debate is really how to achieve those goals effectively. And so, thinking about kind of ideal regulation would be clear regarding goals, but gives flexibility to companies for how to comply with those goals, and the kind of the predictability for day-to-day business counseling and decisions, because product and engineering teams really do need the clarity on what constitutes compliant design. For example, an agent, what users will be looking to agents for synthesizing information down to like single actionable recommendations sometimes. What does fair ranking look like in that situation? Without clear design benchmarks or safe harbors for agents, businesses really face a lot of legal risk just when they're trying to optimize user experience. And so, regulation that says this is the goal, but gives flexibility for how companies achieve that, I think it really would be the ideal outcome. And I think, another thing is that agents really have the opportunity, are creating a lot of opportunity and also risks, but opportunity in the form of lower transaction costs, more innovation, potentially, really truly increased choice. But yeah, risks around control points, potential bottlenecks depending on design. But so, in my view, it's a useful regulatory lens. Is not like a category specific framework, but a consistent focus on conduct and outcomes, using existing competition tools and adapting them where it really is necessary.
I think, being able to adapt the existing tools, there's definitely some adaptation going on right now. Giulio, you kind of mentioned this as well, that just a couple of hours ago, there was an announcement from the Parliament having agreed on the amendments to the AI Act. There are other changes happening as well as part of the wider omnibus. So tell us a little bit more about these changes to the laws, the timeline, and what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we had to be transparent. We didn't know beforehand that everything was gonna happen today, but yeah, the timing has been perfect actually. So today the EU Parliament approved the changes to the EU AI Act under the so-called Digital Omnibus package. Doesn't mean that the law is already in place. It's going to be published on the official gazette, and then will become applicable. It was a kind of rush because the next deadline for the EU AI Act was the 2nd of August of this year, 2026, where new provisions were becoming applicable, and therefore obviously the changes had to become applicable before that. Basically, the idea behind the digital omnibus is to increase competitiveness of the European Union businesses. There was the general perception that EU businesses, or even non-EU businesses operating in the European Union, were not ready to become compliant. And I've seen one of the questions on the chat was everyone speaking about regulations, but no one about enforcement. And indeed, the provisions on sanctions are not yet applicable, even though some of the provisions on other areas, like those on transparency, will become applicable in around a month and half. And some provisions, for instance, on AI literacy, are already applicable. So basically, what has been done relates to the need to avoid duplication. So in regulated environments, so like those under regimes relating to medical devices, machinery regulation, and so on. There was an exemption to the applicability of AI rules just to avoid duplications. This was very much perpetrated by Germany, that has a very strong industrial environment. There were other provisions on non-consensual intimate imagery. That is a very hot topic at the moment in relation to practices against child sexual abuse. There were a delay in the implementation of watermarking obligations to identify AI-generated content. And then there were some redefined provisions on the safety components. So AI systems used only for user assistance, performance optimizations, and efficiency automation, quality control will not qualify as safety components. What has not changed is the overall architecture around the EU AI Act. So the approach on risk, that is risk-based, will remain as it is. The 4 tiers, the conformity assessment regime, the rules specific for general purpose AI systems, the role of the AI office as a sort of oversight role, and we will have to see how it works in practice, because local authorities will not give up their power, and we've seen what happened with the GDPR, where there is so much inconsistency. In relation to the timeline of the UAI Act, some deadlines were postponed. So we already have in place from February of last year the provisions on prohibited practices. Someone could argue, well, the regime on sanctions is not in place. So we have a ban, but we don't have the fines. It's also true that fines could become already applicable in relation to practices performed in the past. We have the rules on general purpose AI systems in place. The watermarking obligations on AI-generated content has been postponed to December of 2026. And then the rules on high-risk AI systems that are embedded in products or subject to sector-specific legislation, as they have been postponed to 2026, to the end of 2027, or mid-2028, depending on the annex in which they fall under the EU AI Act. basically, the idea behind these provisions is to give a bit of more time to companies to become compliant. Honestly, I've seen advising companies in this dealing with the AI systems is that they are kind of running to adopt these solutions, but they don't have any sort of AI governance model. So they adopt these solutions. They don't know what their colleagues are doing with, for instance, general purpose AI systems. So they don't map the solutions. They don't do any sort of risk assessment. Basically, if the provisions were becoming applicable in a month and a half, then we risk that most of the businesses in the market were not compliant. And this is what the EU has been trying to address with these provisions. Back to you, Kay.
Yeah. Catherine, do you have any thoughts or comments on what was said now, and especially, I mean, this effort to reduce the complexity and extend the compliance timelines to give companies more of a chance to come in line with the requirements of the AI Act? Is the Commission doing enough, or rather, are the legislators doing enough here to help make Europe more competitive in line with the Draghi report? Any thoughts or comments on these legislative changes, or is it just causing more uncertainty that is quite frustrating from the compliance side?
Yeah, no, I think actually it's a really good example of flexibility where it makes sense. And I think it comes out of kind of, I don't know if I would say close collaboration, but at least a clear lines of communication between companies and the regulator, and understanding kind of what companies are trying to do. I think there is a sense that companies are really doing what they can to move as quickly as they can to be compliant, but that they just need more time. These systems are are evolving so quickly. You know, Giulio makes a good point about different companies have different kind of varying degrees of maturity of compliance frameworks and internal kind of processes. At Google, we have been, you know, very highly regulated for quite a long time, and I think that we really have built very robust processes internally. But even for us, you know, all of these things have been moving so quickly that it is difficult. So I really think that it's a very encouraging sign that the goal is to kind of regulate companies in a way that is still appreciates the realities on the ground.
Yeah, I think I mean one of the co-leads on the file, actually, the Swedish MEP Arba Kokalari, said that the AI omnibus shows that politics can move just as fast as technology. And I think it's quite an accurate description of how quickly we can go from a big push to regulate, and then moving quickly and showing flexibility where companies have been able to, in the process of coming to compliance, explain the challenges that that compliance entails. Now, I do want to zoom out slightly for a moment. So far, we've been talking about AI regulation in the ordinary legal sense, what the EU AI Act, the DMA, that was mentioned as well, UK sectoral approaches, and the US kind of more hands-off laissez-faire approach has meant how companies comply and where accountability should sit. But with Agentic AI, we're pushing something into a wider debate. It's no longer a question about product safety, like whether AI chatbot output is biased or unsafe or misleading. It really is whether a system that can plan, use tools, write code, and interact with other systems and pursue delegated goals will continue to do what we actually intend. This is what has sometimes been called the alignment question, but it's really in agentic form on steroids. It's not just can we trust the output of a chatbot, it's can we trust these agents to act autonomously in our digital and increasingly in our physical world. And I mean, this, not joking about the physical world, some leaders like Argentina's president recently called on giving legal personhood to AI. So this world is changing quickly, and this is where a lot of this debate comes into this label of existential risk. Some people hear that phrase and think it sounds melodramatic, but journalist Martin Wolf recently wrote that AI is like a nuclear weapon. I think it's a little bit more like nuclear fission, new technology with tremendous applications, some of which could cause significant harm if not carefully controlled. Now, events of these last few days, like we mentioned, Anthropic, have heightened these concerns. Whatever one thinks of the US decision to apply export controls on this, it's clear that frontier AI is not merely a consumer product or software service. Increasingly, it is a strategic and geopolitically significant capability. And that brings us to a bit of a deeper moral issue. Pope Leo XIV recently warned that in the age of AI, we have a duty to remain profoundly human. He also wrote that AI should be disarmed, not in the sense of rejecting technology, but in the sense of preventing technology from dominating humanity. There is a clear sense that we are on the cusp of something entirely new with far-reaching implications where caution is warranted, but where national interests are sometimes pushing for acceleration. I'd like to bring each of you in the last couple of minutes that we have for some final reflections. Are we grappling with the right questions here? What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, and I think you set up the things very well. I mean, on the one hand, there is a kind of international competition not to be the last. And I was at an event last week where US representative said very clearly, I mean, it's us or China. And so that's why we need to be fast and maybe at the risk of being quick and dirty. And so that's one hand of the equation. The other hand is, as you say, it may have some tremendous danger. And so this is why I think, and I don't know if it would be possible, but to have a global agreement on some minimum standard would be absolutely needed, exactly as we have done in nuclear. So I think that that is extremely needed, because otherwise the risk is a race to the bottom or to the top, depending of the how it will end up. But I think that would be that would be the real question. And another thing I wanted to say in responding to a question about building enforcement capacity, because it's all good to have nice rule, but if you don't have a smart enforcement capacity, they are completely useless. And I do think that, yes, Europe is trying to do that, but the way to go is that the regulator should orchestrate an ecosystem of enforcement, basically. So as much as the platform are orchestrating their own ecosystem and make working every site in the interest of the platform, I think the regulator should do the same, and to engage, as Catherine was saying, to engage very much with industry, to engage with civil society, to engage with other regulators in the world to try to get to a solution. But the regulator alone will not be able to make it. It needs to orchestrate an ecosystem of compliance and enforcement.
Thanks. Giulio, do you have some final comments?
Well, yeah.
1 minute.
No, absolutely. It was kind of shocking where you said that you took the Swedish regulator, the legislator is not supposed to keep up with the technological development, and it's not possible. This legislation that is changing so quickly is creating so much confusion, why regulations lead long-term investments, and the fact that sanctions are not in place is a big question mark. We have countries like Italy that last week approved a law that provides a criminal liability for the lack of enforcement, lack of adoption of security measures for high-risk AI systems. So this patchwork legislation is not helping investments. I really hope that the EU AI Act is going to become a benchmark, but the administrations in China and in the US don't seem to go to that direction.
Catherine, one final comment before we send it back to Benoit.
Sure. I mean, thinking about Pope Leo's encyclical, maybe, I think kind of core idea is that technological progress is only true progress if it elevates human dignity. And I think that, I agree. Like AI agents need to be designed to augment human agency. I mean, that is the kind of point. And so to the regulatory debate, I mean, if we want to protect like humanity's role in this like new, quickly shifting world, regulation it should be keeping pace and making and exactly in kind of conversation and collaboration with between agencies and businesses to make sure that the regulation is really getting it right and is looking at the kind of common core obligations to really protect human outcomes. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And Benoit, sorry for going over, but I'm sending it back to you.
Thank you, Kay. And thank you also to Alexandre, Giulio, and Catherine, our panelists, for sharing their insights on AI regulation in this great panel. So good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, good evening, for those of you joining us from different time zones. Today, we really try to answer three key questions. So the first one was whether AI was really going to disintermediate platforms and marketplaces. The second one was really about what happens when AI agents become customers and users of platforms and marketplaces. And the last panel we've just had was really about how do we govern, how do we regulate AI and its agents. So very timely set of questions, and I'd like to just leave you with a couple of takeaways, three actually. So the first point, really, if we step back, I think it's pretty clear that the fear of disintermediation that many platforms had was somewhat overblown. Now, of course, some thin platforms really became substitute to some AI services, and we talked about Chegg and Stack Overflow and others. But the vast majority of platforms and marketplaces have built trust and are currently harnessing the power of AI to further strengthen their capabilities. And Fabrice Grinda, for example, mentioned Vinted and how Vinted was enhancing its network effects through AI-powered translation and also expanding its inventory, increasing its liquidity, etc. So this is a great example and very much consistent with our experience as well. So the second point I'd like to make is that lots of people are, of course, using AI to research products, to find what they're looking for. Indeed, AI is now increasingly embedded in traditional search as well. But agentic commerce, as such, is not really ready for prime time. I was very interested to see that the results of the survey suggest that quite a few people are actually ready to give it a go. We're probably not a representative sample. We are probably biased towards early adopters. But lots of things are happening in the background. So the whole plumbing, all the building blocks required to make agentic AI work, from the payment rails and all the knowledge graph underlying the products and marketplaces, etc. All that's happening, but we're not quite there in terms of letting agents make purchases on our behalf. Now, there's one nuance, of course. You may see videos online on YouTube or other platforms with people showing their own personal agent, like OpenClaw, buying things using some crypto account, etc. These are really, really bleeding edge usage, and we may all have some fear of missing out, but this is not where the market is at the moment, clearly. So that's the second point I wanted to make. And the last point, really, about regulation is that regulation is really no longer this abstract debate that we often have. It's becoming very geopolitical and very real. now we saw that regulation is lots of things. I mean, the broad concept of regulation covers consumer protection. It covers things like, how do we make markets competitive enough, and with antitrust considerations, etc. How do you keep products and features open enough so that there is interoperability, etc. But what we saw this weekend, really, I mean, on Friday, is the US government basically directing Anthropic to stop access to its latest model, frontier model, a Mythos class model, Fable 5, and the only way for Anthropic to comply was to remove access to everybody. And this created a bit of a shockwave in European capitals and beyond. And I understand it's even one of the topics that invited itself to the G7 that is currently taking place in France. So leaders are now talking about how we can find global coordination around these regulatory principles to avoid knee-jerk reactions and make sure that everybody has access. So very interesting panels. I've got two announcements to make. So the first announcement that Laure mentioned, I mean, all these discussions that we're having about AI are continuing and happening online within the community. It's Collective Intelligence for AI, and the website is collectiveintelligence.ai. And we are slowly opening up, so feel free to add your name. We're taking a little bit of time to get everybody on board, but feel free to join us and indicate your interest. So the other announcement I've got is basically about the academic prize. So this is the Platform Leaders Academic Prize for 2026. And as you all know, I mean, one of the missions of Platform Leaders is to foster the understanding between the various communities who are working on digital platforms, and that includes academics and practitioners, and especially research that is exceptionally relevant to practitioners. So we've got 3 finalists that we are announcing, and the 3 finalists for the 26 academic prize are Growing Platforms by Adding Complementers Without a Contract by Maya and Lee, published in Information Systems Research, and in 25. It's a very interesting research on using Grubhub and looking at what happens when Grubhub added lots of restaurants to its platform without telling them, and then what happened later when that was banned. The second paper is Monetizing Platforms, Supply and Demand Responses to Entry Cost, and very interesting paper by Zhu, Shi, and Banerjee in Management Science. 25 as well, and this uses something that happened within Goodreads. They introduced some fee for the giveaway program, and you see that the impact of the fee, how that plays out. And the last paper, Antitrust, Platform Regulation and Entrepreneurship, Evidence from China by Rong, Sokol, Zhu, and Zhu in Management Sciences. That looks at what happens when the Chinese government decided to crack down on antitrust, and how this ended up having a chilling effect on the entire ecosystem. So congratulations to the finalists, and the winning paper will be announced on the 26th of November at the next Platform Leaders event that will take place in London. That will be a hybrid event. So if you want to attend in person, please save the date and register your interest. And of course, if you want to join online, please sign up as well. So that's it from me. We're running a few minutes late, so I'll be very quick with the thank yous. But thank you to everybody. Thank you, of course, to all our panelists, all of you who are attending and active in the chat and asking questions. All the people in the background as well, from Robin and Justin on the chat, and Stephanie and Liam, who has captured the event in real time, scribbing everything that was said. And so thank you all. And that's it from me. I'll leave you with the animated summary of the event by Liam Calabart. And I hope to see many of you in November. Thank you very much.